Okay, hi everybody. So today I'm doing a little bit of a different video just because I did notice that a lot of you are emailing me saying that you're not finding the most effective way to study for this class or for your math classes. And I really want you to help, I really want to help you find a really effective way to study. Now, sometimes it takes a little bit of trial and error. Now, what works for one person doesn't work for another person. So just keep that in mind. Here are just some suggestions that I've done and some I haven't done just because they're not my preference, but I just put them on here just in case they might work for you. So it's breaking up into how you should study like just on a regular basis, how you should study like on an exam week or weekend or during finals. And now, just because of the extreme circumstances, I'm also going to have a suggestion for you of how to study during quarantine. And actually, let's start with how you should study during quarantine real quick before I go into these study methods. Now, when I study, I actually used to do this even before quarantine, before all this craziness is, if you find that you have a lot of people in your house or you're easily distracted. I used to wake up, and I'm not a morning person at all by any means, but I used to wake up like at 5, 6 in the morning some mornings and make myself a lot of coffee. As many of you know, I have a huge addiction to coffee. And I used to just, take 30 minutes in the morning for myself to, wake up, get ready for this, turn on my music, set up my study section, make sure it's clean so that I'm not wanting to, pick things up around me because if I see that something's out of order, I want to fix it. So I'd spend like 30 minutes just trying to get that going. Shower if you need to. And then I would start studying, and I would study while everybody is asleep just because I find that when people are asleep, I work more effectively. And I used to try to do like this thing where I would try to get as much studying done before like the sun would come up or before like anybody was awake, just because it was hard for me to study. Another thing is, so that during this quarantine, maybe you're not a morning person, maybe try waking up at 6, 7 in the morning. It's going to be hard when you first do it, but I promise you it's totally worth waking up early just to get some studying done, not just for this class, but for your other classes too. And if you can't wake up early, maybe wait until your household is asleep, whatever time that is. So maybe nap while they're awake. And then when you know that they go to sleep, set an alarm and wake up and then start studying then if it's really late, if you're a night owl. So that's something I would suggest you do during quarantine. And maybe even get your parents or your siblings to help you out studying, maybe you guys can set like hey, between 2 to 3 or between 3 to 4, we are going to sit down and be quiet and just do homework together and with no distractions, or maybe even go study outside. I don't know how that's going to work because it's starting to get a little hot. But, do whatever you need to do, because I feel like when you are alone with your thoughts, that you're able to study a little bit more effectively. So there's that. But I personally love studying in the morning. That's just, I can't study any time past 11. I just get kind of delusional. So I prefer to just wake up really early and try to get it done. Okay, so here are some study methods. Now, they don't work for everybody. And like I said, I had to learn the hard way too. And nobody actually even showed me how to study. For me, it was kind of like whatever I was doing wasn't working, so I had to figure out a different way. But I want you guys to be able to maybe try to find these a little bit faster than I did, because the faster you find your study techniques, the better you'll do. And I want you guys all to do really well. So one thing I would highly suggest is to read over your book before that section. So if we're covering like 5.1, maybe read over it. You won't know what some of those words mean, and that's okay. Because when you listen to my lecture or you listen to lecture in class, when you had in-person classes, you start to make those connections a little bit quicker. And if you don't have time to read over the entire section, maybe just skim it and look at the important keywords, and that will also help you draw attention. So whether it's like, okay, maybe you get to class early and you only have 5 minutes to skim over the section you're going to look over, then skim over that section you're going to look over. Might make your life a little bit easier. Another thing is, the second thing that on the list here is to rewrite your notes. And this is kind of an optional thing, but it's something that always worked for me, and it doesn't work for everybody else. The reason I decided that it's a good idea for me to rewrite my notes is because when I first started college, I noticed that I would spend time in class trying to make my notes legible and neat. And then I would realize that I wasn't even paying attention to the teacher at all. And the teacher had a lot of good concepts, and sometimes he would say stuff that weren't on the whiteboard, and so I would miss that completely because I was too focused on making my notes nice and neat. So what I used to do is I used to get a blank sheet of paper at the beginning of class and then date it, whatever, and then, you know, just write super sloppy. I only had one pencil, maybe a different colored pen, just to just in case something else was super important and needed to really highlight it. But I would write and it would be all crazy and messy and obviously legible enough for me to read. And then I would go back home and rewrite the lecture from scratch and try to recall what we learned in class, because then that way I was able to pay attention and I was still able to take notes. And then by the second time, I was able to kind of relearn some of that material. It's like I was reliving the lecture in my head over and over again. And now that this is optional, like I said, all of this is optional, but that's just something that really worked for me. And I loved it because when I got home, I would rewrite it so they were nice and cute and colorful, because it would make me want to study them more when they were nice and neat. But that's just a preference. And maybe one of these days, if you ask, I can maybe look for some of my old notes and show you, because they're kind of nice. Next thing is that while you're doing those notes, is if you know, like for example, Calc 2, we do a lot of derivatives, is to make flashcards on those derivatives or important concepts where flashcards are easy. You don't want to make flashcards for just, you know, random things, but you can. Like I had one of my classmates, she would make flashcards for homework problems. So after she did a homework problem, she would do the flashcards, write the answer in the back if it wasn't too long, and then she would, before an exam, you know, redo them, or before a final, just redo them and test herself to see if she could redo them over and over again. And actually, that's not a bad idea because we have a final coming up and we know it's commutative. So yeah, she would put all the questions as we ever done for each section in each flashcard and just, you know, go over it over and over again. Questions from the notes, questions from anything, and she would just redo it over and over again. But again, like that's a personal preference. So now, that's just during normal times, but if you're like in the middle of an exam week or a finals week, the first thing that you need to do is make a list. What do you need to cover? What do you need to study? What are important concepts that you need to do? And I make this kind of easy for you to do because when I give you a review, let's just look and skim over, is I actually tell you what topics are important for you to know. So for example, like they're not listed because I don't want to spend a lot of room, but I'll say, hey, absolute extreme on a closed interval. Do you know how to do that? So make a list of everything and check it off once you feel really comfortable with each section. And maybe do them yellow if you're okay with them, and then red if you really don't understand, like evaluating definite integrals. Make a list of those things so that you know if you're missing anything to study for an exam and you're not overwhelmed with going, oh my God, I have so much to study. Make a list. It's going to seem like a lot at first, but as soon as you start working on problems and working on concepts, it'll become a lot easier. So make a list on what you want to study and how you're going to study too. Second is, some people like to redo the homework. I personally wasn't one of those people who redid their homework. I usually, if my teacher gave a review, I would redo the review more than once, but if she didn't give me, or he didn't give me a review, I would redo the homework or the quizzes or whatever. And then the fourth thing, so yeah, redo the homework if you want to, or maybe just redo a couple of them if you know you're having trouble with that particular section. And then I would do the review more than once. The first time I would do a review, I would struggle with it. It would be painful, but I would just get through it, and then I'd take a break from it. If I had time, I would take a day or two break from it and then redo it. If I didn't have time, maybe just a few hours, and then I would redo it. The second time you redo it, you should do it a lot faster, and then you'll notice where you're having more trouble on, and then you can focus on those areas again. And then the fourth thing is to summarize each section. So for example, if you want to summarize all of chapter 4, you can summarize all of chapter 4 and summarize each section as well. And what I mean by summarize is you have notes on these sections, you write notes on these sections, but now you can do a condensed version of them also, so that you have them in a little bit of a smaller scale. And I would write like definitions, theorems, steps to things, any concepts that are important here, and I would do them in my own words so that I had them. And then I would redo quizzes, and then I would study in groups. And when you study in groups, I just want to caution you on this is I love studying groups. I always tell my students, studying groups, studying groups, studying groups. It's good for you to study in groups. But what you want to do here is before you study in groups, do some studying on your own. So for example, I would study in groups and say, okay, for this study session, let's all focus on these few sections. Go ahead and read over those sections on your own, do some homework problems on your own. That way you know where you're struggling, where you need help, and where you're actually doing really well in. So when you go into that study group, you're not in there blindly, because the worst thing that you can do for yourself is go into a study group, not knowing what the sections are about at all. And then you just feel overwhelmed because everybody knows a lot more than you do. And it's just because they reviewed those concepts, and that's like a horrible feeling. So I don't want you to feel like that. So always study on your own so that way you know where you're stuck. That way you can ask your classmates for help, and you now have an idea why you're stuck and they can easily help you. And then also if you are doing really well in a particular section in that area and your classmate is not, then you can help them out. So you guys are helping each other out. Or if you're both struggling, maybe you guys can build each other together and get through that section. Seventh thing is office hours. We're here to help you as professors. We want you to do well, especially because most of you, at least for this class, most of you are moving on to Calc 2, and I don't want you to move on to Calc 2 without having a strong foundation in Calc 1, because it's really just gonna hurt you, and it's gonna hurt you in the long run in Calc 3, and also, and I don't want that. So come to office hours when you're really stuck. I'm here to help you, and if you want, I could be your study group if you really need me to, until you get the hang. I know some of you guys don't like to study in groups, but we need to try to get over that, because the farther we go up in math, or the farther we go up in our upper division courses, the more we're gonna need each other. And you guys are in this class together, and you guys should want to be successful together. So there's that. And then actually I forgot another thing, and this is like one of my hugest things that I actually do and I love doing, which is pretend cheat sheet. So what do I mean by that? Okay, so obviously you can't have a cheat sheet in my class. Obviously you can't have a cheat sheet in Calc 2 or in some of your classes. But if I did let you use one, right? I'm not gonna let you use one. But if I did, what would you put on it? You would put your heart, soul, and everything that you need to be successful for that exam, right? So I used to get a cheat sheet. So I used to get a blank, like white sheet of paper, like a regular computer-sized paper like this. And I used to, by hand, write all the important concepts, everything that fit. Sometimes I would fold it into like 4 ways like this. And I would just write down all the important concepts for that section, everything I needed to be successful in that class. Now, I didn't use it on my exam, but writing the material, honestly, for like the 3rd time made it so much easy to just remember. Like I remember I used to take the test and remember like where it was on my cheat sheet in my brain, and that would be super awesome. And it's a way for you to condense all of your exam or section notes on one piece of paper, so that way it doesn't seem as overwhelming than having all this like craziness. But I would do this either towards the end or after I, like, let's say, like after I finish summarizing a section, I would like then re-summarize it on this piece of paper, or I would wait till the end to like get a more closed thing. So whatever order you do it in, if you do it in little by little or all at once, that's fine. And it seems like a lot, but like I said, I used to spend about, maybe in Calc 2, I used to spend like 12 to 14 hours studying a week for calculus. But that's just because this class does require that amount of work. Not every week I used to spend like that, but especially on exam weeks I would, and sometimes even more on exam weeks. So this is just something to think about. There's also more study methods out there, and maybe talk to your classmates to see what works for them. One of my classmates, she used to literally not study, don't do this, but she wouldn't study and she used to just watch us study, and that worked for her. But like I said, everybody's different. So try things. If you don't like them, don't do them again. Why waste your time, right? Try something else. But these are just a few things that actually really worked. And during this quarantine, you know, try to take advantage and make a schedule for the day and say, I'm going to wake up early, I'm going to study, I'm going to take a break, then I'm going to study for a little bit or try to re-summarize things over and over again. And then, oh my goodness, I totally forgot something. How dare I? It's a really good technique, and I just learned about this not that long ago, which is called a memory dump. So let's say you study for like 2 hours in the morning, and then you're going to stop, take a break, go eat something, whatever. Before you stop, dump everything down on a piece of paper. And it doesn't have to be neat. Just write everything that you studied, all the concepts. And then before you put it away, look at what you actually studied and make sure everything's on there. Whatever is not on there, put it in a different color. That way you remember that you forgot about that. And that way you're kind of just keep on re-summarizing that material and reinforcing it. Okay, so this is something new that I recently learned when I was in SI. And I was like, why didn't I know this earlier? Like maybe it would have made my life a little bit easier. I did it recently in my last master's class and it worked really effectively. So I would suggest trying it. It doesn't hurt to try. It only takes about a minute or two to do the dump and just dump everything on your brain onto that piece of paper. But also if you have any suggestions on other material, actually wouldn't be a bad idea. Put it on the comments down below and tell your classmates how you study. Because you're gonna want to help each other out, and maybe they have some suggestions for you haven't tried. So, right, good luck studying. And this is kind of a late video, but better late than never. And finals are coming up, so you could use this in your other classes as well.